Reading from Dallas Pimiento, Book 1, Bronco. Profusely symmetrical. From out of his box came Hebnel, an insect-like creature with the head of a young man. He was red in color, though his legs were black. "What's all this about the end of human civilization?" he asked one of the secretaries. "Oh, it's just a little joke," the woman paused in her typing to tell him. "It doesn't sound like a joke." His eyebrows were lowered. That evening, Hebnel again emerged from his comfortable box. He stole down to the commissary, which was lit only by the glow of the vending machines. He had brought with him an illustrated book of myths. This he tossed onto one of the tables on his way to one of the vending machines. Although the pads on the ends of his feet were seemingly clumsy, he pulled a few coins out of his change purse easily enough. He bought a honey bun and a half-pint of milk. Opening the book, The Secret Saxophone, more or less at random, he found himself staring at a detailed map of some bizarrely shaped land. "What are you looking at?" I asked Hebnel as I entered the commissary. Was I disappointed that the six-legged fellow did not jump? No. I don't like scaring people. Some think that scaring people is funny. I don't. "Are you going to throw me off the roof if I answer incorrectly?" Hebnel asked, not looking up from his book. "I doubt I could," I said. "I'm looking at this book of myths." Hebnel held up the book's cover to me. "You belong in that book," I said. I pulled out a chair and sat heavily down. It had been a long night. I was beginning to feel my age. Hebnel opened his honey bun. "Do you know how many calories are in those things?" I asked. "No, and I don't care," he said with his mouth full. I sighed. Time to try a different tack. I returned to the roof for the third time that day. It was raining, but in the distance one could still see the luminosity of the eternal television. It was growing. One day it would loom over this landscape like the sun itself. I was scared, and I did jump. Part 3. Duck's Table as it is today. Dry pinto beans spilled out of the jar Nick had so carelessly knocked over. "Watch it, Nick," Susan, drunk and married to a Mexican who lived across town, warned Nick as she wagged a finger. Most of the beans were accounted for, either picked up immediately and put back in the jar, which fortunately did not break, or stepped on, cracked, and later swept up when the place was cleaned for the incoming tenants. But 3 of the beans had bounced under the non-functional radiator and been forgotten. Rest, the largest of the beans, was the first to come to life. He looked about, disappointed at finding the beans accompanying him to be not from among his tribe. He prodded them with an umbrella he found until they each woke up. "I'm Rest," he told them, prompting them to give him their names, Call and Delanfy. "Seems we're stuck together. Any objections to hanging around with a member of the Bando tribe?" Rest asked him. "Don't be so defensive," Cole growled. He found some shoes and put them on. "Damn it, these don't fit." He threw them across the floor. "Yeah," Delanfy added. "After all, it's Shagral tribe that everyone hates." "Is that what you are?" Rest asked. "Yeah, but can't you tell by my accent? You people are always making fun of how we talk." Cole poked around in the refuse that lay all about them. "Can't find any shoes that fit," he complained. "Hey, pal," Delanfy called to him. "What tribe are you?" "Fiskerson," Cole answered. Rest and Delanfy looked at each other. They sucked their cheeks in. Fancy, Rest said. "We are indeed privileged," Delanfy drummed his fingers in the air. "Oh, knock it off," Cole growled. "These will have to do," he said as he drew on a battered pair of cowboy boots. "Can't go barefoot, can we, rich boy?" Delanfy cracked. "I'm not—" "Do I look rich to you?" Cole demanded. "Rich in education," Rest quipped. The beans spent the remainder of the year hunting for the way outside a selection of orchestras. On the surface of the small moon, relaying biscuit orders from the hard-working men of This Is Your Postal Service, was an automated unit contained in a building about as large as those old-fashioned photomat booths that people of my generation only barely remember. "That reminds me of a photomat," I told the precious young people with me. "What's a photomat?" one of the girls asked. "A relic of the 70s, joked Will, dressed in his faded bell-bottom jeans and his red T-shirt with a picture of a Chinese dragon on it. Now, I reprimanded the boy gently. "Photomats provided employment for kids just like you who didn't want to do manual labor in the sun." "Did you work in one?" asked Sabrina, hottest of the barely college-aged youth. "No, I bagged groceries," I said. We walked closer to the relay unit. "I hear something." I cocked my ear dramatically. "Let's investigate," urged Keith. He reminded me of myself at that age, ready to enter into the spirit of the game, the play acting, and totally oblivious to how most of the girls looked upon him as a creep. Those who didn't see him that way were either repulsive to him or didn't see him at all. He would have to learn, as I had, not to be so picky. "Yes," I said. Reluctantly, the group followed, knowing only that I had the keys to the lander in my pocket. 10 biscuits with sausage, 5 biscuits with steak, 2 biscuits with steak and egg, 3 biscuits with sausage and egg and cheese," a robotic voice recited. "It's someone's biscuit order," I said, wildly, enthusiastically. "Duh," croaked a gawky girl. "Look, Starling," I snapped. "Starla," she corrected. "Starla. No more of your wise-ass comments. That goes for all of you. I know you think this is boring, but it's—" Another interruption, this time from a man inside the relay unit. "What's going on out there?" he demanded, coming to the window. "I'm sorry," I said. "I thought this unit was automated." "It is," he barked, pointing a thumb at his chest. Secluded Activities boat. "Remind me to take 2 Motrin after we finish here," I instructed one of the crab machines in the room. "Yes, sir," the robotic servitor replied. "I say, Lance," Dr. Steinfeld interrupted his contemplation of his next move, we were playing chess, to ask me something. "Why do you say Motrin and not ibuprofen when you never take the name brand, but rather the generic?" He moved his white bishop to B3. "How do you know I never take the name brand?" I asked. "I know how cheap you are. You'd never take the more expensive pill when you could get the cheaper generic." "I think you spy on me." "My dear chap, how could I?" he craved to know, rhetorically of course. After I had driven him to tip his king, I set out to determine how he was conducting his spying. I went to the window, and while the elderly PhD was examining some framed examples of my juvenilia, slipped through it to the outside. "Sir, your Motrin," the crab machine mentioned earlier, called to me as I was nearly around the far corner of the abandoned church. "Damn it," I growled. I was forgetting things far too often lately. It was annoying to have to depend on artificial aids to memory, but there really was no remedy for it. I had tried many times over the years to boost my failing short-term memory. Long-term was no problem. I had full access to detailed files stretching back to the foundation of the ghost civilization on the island, the most successful of which was the mnemonic hat that dangled reminders in front of me. The shortcomings of this hat were revealed to me when it promoted false memories, the ways I thought certain movies should have ended, for example, as much as real ones, and by the inconvenience of wearing it at the theater. I re-entered the old church by the front door and went to the medicine cabinet. I put 2 of the painkillers in my mouth and swallowed them without water. If the mouth is sufficiently moist, there is no need to wash pills down with anything, I find. Grated nutmeg is another matter. In order to choke that stuff down, it is vital that one use an ample amount of fluid. If the fluid is grape soda, there is the added benefit of killing the horrible taste. Felt's stratagem still lingers. A stalwart cheese of the old church, taken by its fingers to the fabled Carlot of Davidson, fell apart at the mention of time's inexorable passage. "Jesus Christ, what's wrong with him?" one of the tired disciples asked. There was no one around to hear his query, however. The lot was deserted. Most were down at the river watching the Marsh King's arrival, but a few, like Ray and I, were ascending staircases in the ancient boarding houses, makeshift weapons in hand. "I wish your friend Jerry was here instead of me," Ray whispered. "I thought you liked adventure. At least that's what you claimed when you answered the ad," I whispered back. "What?" he asked. I guess the old stairs were squeaking too much, or he just wasn't a good listener. "Never mind," I hissed. I took a step more, then turned back to look at Ray. "And," I said, making sure he could hear me, "Jerry isn't my friend. I know. He's Toadsgaboat's friend. But it amounts to the same thing, doesn't it?" Ray must have been scared indeed to speak to me thus. "You know what?" I began, not wanting to acknowledge the theory he had put forth. "I do wish I had a friend here. Someone I could rely on." "You don't think you can rely on me?" Ray pretended to be hurt. I started to tell him what I really thought, but was stopped by the sudden appearance of Dallas Pimiento at the top of the stairs. "What are you fellows doing?" he asked. "A ghost!" Ray croaked. "Dallas Pimiento!" I was staggered. "Lance Ash!" Pimiento seems genuinely happy and delightedly surprised to see me. I gasped. "Are you a ghost?" I asked. "That's a good question," he mused. "Get him!" Ray bellowed and started charging up the stairs. I struck Ray neatly on the top of his head with my big stapler. "That looks familiar," Pimiento commented. I looked down at Ray's lifeless body tumbling to a halt halfway down the stairs. A real friend is one you shouldn't have to pay for. I felt silly even as I said it. Zombie wings lift their intended passenger. The puppet selected for the task was Weaver Hade, a friendly chap, but one with a streak of melancholy that he tried to keep hidden, so friendly was he determined to be. He wore a bowler, a short choppy mustache, and seemed to be forever clutching at his solar plexus. "Do you like poetry?" I asked him. Hade ineptly rubbed his chin. "That depends," he said. "I like old-fashioned poetry, stuff that rhymes, what you might call minor poetry." "Light verse?" I suggested. "If you mean humorous verse, then no. I mean Eugene Field, Walter de la Mare, While he attempted to think of a third, I jumped in with, "But those could be considered writers of light verse." "Yes, but..." Again he tried to come up with something to say. "Do you like Houseman?" I finally asked him what I had been meaning to ask all along. I had been reading A Shropshire Lad recently and wanted to talk about it. "Yes, that's the kind of thing. It's not trivial, yet isn't heavy-handed either. And it feels like poetry to me when I read it." Someone, a teenage boy in the small audience, disrupted our conversation. "This stinks," he shouted. "A lowbrow," Hade commented. "What kind of puppet show is this?" the boy continued. "Yeah, it's boring," another of his kind added. Dallas Pimiento stepped out of the informal wings of our little theater. "I'm sorry, you'll have to leave," he ordered the youths. "This is a public sidewalk," a woman in her late 30s protested. "You're defending them?" I was stunned. "I'm not defending anybody. I'm simply pointing out that this is a public place." The woman, whom I immediately put down as a modern-day hippie, told me in a confident tone, one of moral superiority, that I cannot stand. During this exchange, Pimiento had remained in place before the stage. Hey Dallas, Hade hissed. "Move out of the way. I want to get a look at her." "You traitor." I tried for a cheap puppeteer's laugh. "She's moderately attractive," said Hade poetically. "Fall forward with Scrum's own illusion." I bought a smart-looking case for Dallas Pimiento. I presented it to him over lunch. "It's very nice," he said, "but what am I supposed to keep in it?" "Whatever you like," I told him. "You're not giving this to me out of guilt, are you?" He looked at me over the top of the opened case. "Certainly not." I put another pillow of ravioli in my mouth. "Because you know you killed me." Now I couldn't see his face. He seemed totally concealed by his new case. "Well, obviously I didn't," I retorted. He made no reply, so I went on. "Because no one comes back from the dead." I looked down at the last of the food on my plate. I was already full, but felt compelled to finish. Would I make the right decision and stop now? "You aren't a ghost," I insisted, shoving the plate away. I put out my hand and pushed on the upturned half of the case. It fell down, revealing the absence of Dallas Pimiento. "I guess it's my case now," I said aloud, scanning to the left and right of me without turning my head. One of the waiters came over to the table. "Is everything all right, sir?" he asked. "Did you happen to notice where my companion went?" I asked him. "No, sir." "Okay," I nodded shallowly. I asked for and received the bill, left the payment, I asked for and received the bill, left the payment and an imprecisely calculated tip on the table, and left the place, taking the case with me. Outside, in the still too cold for my taste early spring air, I hefted the case. It seemed a bit too heavy for what it contained, which was, after all, nothing. Had Pimiento slipped me a little parting gift? Crazily, I imagined that he had put his abandoned plate of food in there. What was he so upset about? In this new era, it couldn't possibly still be possible for a person to expect to hold on to corporeality with nothing more than some irresponsible fiction to his name. As I thought about that, I wondered if it made any sense. I shook my head at my continuing folly and entered the park. I sat on a bench and opened the case. "Give me a hand, will you?" Pimiento begged in a little voice. A paradox in outflow. Even as I struggled to keep my eyes in focus, someone in the crowd emerging from the institution recognized me. "Aren't you Lance Ash?" the young woman asked me. "Yes," I answered, tipping back my head like John Lennon in order to see my interlocutor more clearly. She looked down at my shoes for some reason. Smiling, she shook her head slightly as she worked her way up my body, passing over the pubic region with no greater interest than the rest of me. Thank the gods. "I've only seen a photograph of you," she said as she returned to my face. Oh, yeah? I glanced at my watch. Time was running out, but I could afford to waste a little more of it for a stranger who had knowledge of me from a secondary source. Yes, on the back of one of your books. She set my heart galloping with these words. Which one? I was eager to know. I would probably go home at once and reread it. Intricate Sardonic Rogueries, she told me slowly, wanting to get the title out correctly. Oh, really? Well, good. I could sense the waning of my interest now that she had said that much, enough to know she had read it, or seen it, too much to expect that she had loved it. What I really wanted was to hear her discuss it, but in addition to realizing that that was beyond all hope, I also didn't have time. But then I had to ask, did you like it? Yes, I did. Her eyes, it seemed to me, drifted to the monument to our way of northern aggression dead, just beyond me. Well, good. I'm glad. I smiled by frowning, and nodded once preparatory to moving on with my life. We each stepped away from the spot as if repelled by surface tension. Well, not really, but that sounds psychically correct. See you, I said from a distance. I wish I had a copy of it with me so you could autograph it, she called. I made a face of appreciation, repressed hilarity. I made it to my car and drove all the way home in an angry flutter, eager to get back and write something that had nothing to do with the encounter. Knitted Pasteboard Factory. The lights inside the postal facility are pink. The official reason why they are pink is that this cuts down on glare, but the real reason is that the pink lights keep one subconsciously confused as to what the real time of day it is. True, this eternal dusk, or is it dawn, encourages sleepiness, but it also deadens the spirit, something far more important to the hidden masters of the postal system. After a long weekend of aesthetic indulgence, relatively speaking, it is hard for me to face those pink lights. What I need to counteract them is caffeine, but I have given up that last drug addiction, the first whose sway I fell under, in the name of greater devotion of my religion/philosophy of loath procurement, or just plain procurement. Even chocolate is denied me. Instead of chocolate chips, the cookies now contain nuggets of cork from the Cecil Taylor's tree, which, as you must know by now, grows only on the small moon hanging in pseudonymous orbit in my room. That's no moon. It's a space station, my elderly passenger asserts. Please, sir, will you stay out of the cockpit? Thank you. I had to lead the old fellow back to his seat and give him the last cork nugget cookie. Maybe it would mollify him. After all, they excited me. Mentally, that is. Physically, they did little more than get my emotions churning. The lights don't look so pink from up here, I commented to one of the orchard attendants. Red shift, he explained. Ah. Say, pal, the man addressed me, why do you come all this way to get these cork nuggets? Why don't you just buy them at your local grocery store? I didn't know I could get them at the store. I was aghast. What a waste of gas. Sure, they're packaged under the name of Zombios. They come in a black package. In the bakery section? I asked for confirmation. Yeah. I thanked the man and hopped back to my transport. I was back on the floor before I realized I had forgotten my passenger. Delusioned reactionary. Some have accused you of self-pity, Dallas Pimiento, playing the part of a television interviewer for a show like 60 Minutes, put it to me. You mean in my work? I asked. Yes. Pimiento wore a gray, lightweight summer suit. He had let his hair grow out in the back and into a collegiate DA, the first step on the road to corruption. I sat back and mused on this accusation. Of course, in the edited version, as broadcast, it appeared that I mused for only a second. In reality, I took the rest of the afternoon off to wander about the grounds and contemplate what some had accused me of. Did I really present a self-pitying persona through my work? It was hard to countenance such a thing, in light of all the grand visions of triumph I had slopped out over the years. Down at the power plant on the edge of the known universe, I bought a honey bun from a vending truck and protested complete, all-encompassing ignorance at the proprietor's efforts at engaging me in a conversation about the NASCAR events of the previous day. From my hotel room, provided by the producers of the program, I called Pimiento and told him that I thought I had the answer to his question. What question? He asked groggily. Apparently he was unwinding the way journalists do. The one about my work displaying self-pity. That wasn't a question. His words were slightly slurred. I heard the cynical laughter of his peers in the background. How do you figure? I wanted him to see his error. I merely commented that some of your critics have accused you of self-pity. I didn't frame it as a question. I could hear the rustling of the pages of a notebook. He must have had the documentation right there, probably in the sweaty inner pocket of his lightweight summer suit. "Oh," I said. "Well, I have my response ready." "Good. We'll meet you in the morning and take it up where we left off." "Okay. Oh, and another thing. Wear the same thing you wore today." I agreed and hung up, wondering whom these critics were he mentioned. He hadn't said anything the day before about them being critics. We'll leave it there for tonight.